Teardrops and blood streaks and drug-induced horrors, skeletons and children with mental disorders, dark shadows, insects and eyeballs on strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Sorry, I don't know how to start videos. I've never known how to start videos. I'm sure we're gonna review video games. Alright, now here's a game that really surprised me last year. Fran Bow. Everyone knows about Fran Bow, right? I assume everyone does, cause, you know, multi-million view Let's Plays and fan art and the upcoming movie adaptation by Michael Bay. I'm kidding, there's no movie, I made that up. Well, for any of you who don't know, Fran Bow is a psychological point-and-click adventure horror game released by Swedish development team Kill Monday. And when it came out last year, it immediately caught my attention. Not only for its dark, twisted, nightmare-inducing imagery, but also for its beautiful-looking art style, and its soft, fuzzy, surreal, children's bookish aesthetic. I also just really like point-and-click adventure games, because I'm like an easily entertained child, and clicking on stuff is fun. The game revolves around a young girl named Fran, trapped in an asylum and stuck in perpetual grief over the loss of her dead parents. Which sounds like the exact same plot as American McGee's Alice. What a fucking ripoff. But you know why Fran Bow ended up surprising me when I played it? It surprised me because it wasn't like most horror games. See, most horror games are scary the first time you play them. You know, if they're even scary at all. But Fran Bow, it wasn't scary the first time I played it. It was scary the second time I played it. See, the game's story was really engrossing and really weird, and it made me want to go back and play it more than once. And the more I played it, the more I thought about it and realized what was really going on in the story, the more dark, depressing, and disturbing Fran Bow became. So the game starts out with Fran talking to her doctor about her sad, messed up past. She recalls seeing a beastly Satan-looking monster in her window one night, then soon after hearing a frightening noise. She then remembers walking into a room to find her parents brutally murdered, mangled and chopped into pieces all over the floor. She remembers running away from home in horror that night, with her black cat at her side, Mr. Midnight, who she describes as being her one and only friend. After fainting in the woods, she lost Mr. Midnight, and promptly got found and then taken here to Oswald Asylum, where the game begins. "I'm so tired of all this," says Fran to her doctor. "I just want to go to my room." "Yes, you can leave. But before you do, it's time for your new medicine." "What medicine?" "It's called Duotine, and it'll make you feel very relaxed." Well, that looked fun. And relaxing. The first thing you have to do in the game is escape from the asylum. It's good old point-and-click adventure, puzzle-solving gameplay, but with a slight twist. At any time you want, you can take Fran's pills, which allow you to switch between the normal world and a crazy, morbid hell world. Obviously, not the first game to do something like this, but my god, is it done well. I will laugh at you. I will lie to you. I will hide you inside the shadows. I like what the black ghosty things say. Fran Bow's hell world is crazy, twisted, and extremely interesting right from the beginning. And honestly, the normal world is too. The asylum is a very miserable, mysterious place. All around you there are children with psychiatric problems, sad, disgusting living conditions, cruel, corrupt staff members. Oh, and clown paintings. Why are there so many clown paintings? One thing I liked about Fran Bow's world right when I started playing was just how many details there were to get lost in. There are so many things to click on in this game, and Fran has so many things to say about the things you click on in this game. "Get out, creepy creature!" "Oh, is that my head? Give me my head back, please." "Oh, boy, why do you have your brain out? Is it too warm in there? I guess the mice will come and have some meat. If I sit down, I will eventually get up, so what's the point? To ride the choo-choo train is the best! It sings all the time, choo-choo, and then you crash and die." Anyway, during the first chapter, you find out Fran has a relative named Aunt Grace, who seems to be the only family she has. So Fran escapes the asylum intending to find Aunt Grace's house, and to hopefully also find her long-lost cat, Mr. Midnight. And oh, the things you see after this. That is a giant ant with a beard and a walking stick, and also a little pet that he calls his beetle pig. Yeah, life isn't weird at all. At this point, Fran Bow is just full of incredible, strange things to see. It very much does become a horror-themed Alice in Wonderland, like that one similar game that it ripped off. But it always retains its own unique personality, and its own original feel that doesn't really feel like any other game I've ever played. Very similar to the game Sanitarium, an older point-and-click adventure with a lot of the same themes, Fran Bow is split into a number of chapters, each of which is so trippy, different, and psychologically confusing, it's hard to make sense of any of it at first. The first chapter is actually the goriest one, the most horrifying, miserable, and disturbing part of the game. But the second chapter is more mystical, like a dark magic little fairy tale. After walking through the woods and meeting the giant ant and everything, Fran next enters a well with a door on it, and then winds up in a small house on an island in the middle of nowhere. Which makes complete logical sense. Here she meets Clara and Mia, two conjoined twins who turn out to be keeping Mr. Midnight locked in a cage in their attic. Oh, my dearest kitten, it's me! Oh, Fran, I'm so happy to see you. I missed you very much. I had dreams about you. Oh man, this is touching. I'm sure she totally is here in this attic talking to her cat and not completely tripping out on drugs. In the third chapter, Fran and Mr. Midnight escape the house, but they suddenly get attacked in the wilderness by the devil creature once again, who's been stalking Fran all throughout the game. After getting attacked, they end up falling off a cliff, but instead of dying when they hit the ground, they somehow find themselves taken to a mysterious land called Ithursta. This is the most colorful, bright, and offbeat section of the game. Throughout the whole Ithursta chapter, Fran's body takes the form of a tree, and she meets lots of tree beings there, as well as vegetables, rocks, insects, and other various earthy things. This part of the game was so cool to me. I just love that this horror game tries to be so much more than a horror game. There's almost nothing horrifying at all going on in this chapter, in fact. And it's really nice to see the game artistically breaking expectations and doing whatever the hell it wants. Also, there's paper swirls. I like the paper swirls. While exploring the land of Ithursta, Fran learns a lot more about what's going on in the story as well. She learns that the big black devil creature following her is actually a being named Remor, the Prince of Darkness. And all those shadow beings from earlier in the game, those are called Kamalas. Remor and the Kamalas are said to come from a place called the Fifth Reality, which is one of the 5 realms of the universe. It's said that they feed on only sadness and suffering. So Remor likes to watch Fran cry, and he likes to cause her pain. So, is he the one who killed her parents? Well, if you haven't played Fran Bow, you should probably stop watching this video right now. After you exit Ithursta, there are only 2 chapters left in the game. In chapter 4, you meet Fran Bow's imaginary friend, Itward, who despite being an incredibly creepy looking skeleton man, seems to be a source of comfort for Fran, and offers to take her home with his flying machine. Behold, the Itward flying machine. What do you think? I love it! It has many buttons to push. Yes, with this gorgeous piece of machinery, I'll take you home. Word of advice, kids. If a random tall skeleton man asks you to climb aboard his flying machine, probably don't do that. The rest of the chapter takes place on the machine itself, as Fran and Itward take off into the sky. But unfortunately, while they're in the air, the machine unexpectedly gets attacked by the Kamalas, and starts to go down. This actually leads to one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the game, in my opinion, where Itward tells Fran it's too late, that the ship is going down, and that he can't take her home anymore. Hearing this, Fran starts crying and holds Mr. Midnight as the machine begins to crash, and then Itward kneels down to comfort her, promising he'll always be there when she needs him. Next, Fran wakes up in the woods again, apparently alive. She then finally reaches her neighborhood and makes her way home. But before she can get inside the house, Dr. Deern from the asylum shows up in his car and tells her to come with him. At this point, the game starts to answer some questions, while at the same time bringing about many more questions. Fran learns that Dr. Deern got fired from working at the asylum because he knew too much. Dr. Deern explains to Fran that she had been believed to be dead to most of the world outside the asylum, that the people working at the asylum framed her as dead and have all kept kept this under wraps. The fifth and final chapter of the game is probably the coolest of them all. After Fran and Dr. Deern talk, they suddenly get attacked by Remor again, and everything gets surreal, random, and hazy from here on out. Fran first visits memories of her childhood, recalling being stuck in the asylum even when she was young. Then she wakes up tied to a bed by Aunt Grace, who seems to be an asshole. And when Aunt Grace leaves and she escapes from the bed, she finds herself finally exploring the fifth reality. I loved the atmosphere of this place. This was my favorite location to explore when I first played the game. Here, you get to explore creepy hallways floating in the sky, you get to venture deep into the heart of darkness, and you even get to meet a lovely giant eyeball. And then, the end of the game just happens. At the end, Fran finally confronts Remor, demanding to know why she's here and who killed her parents. But Remor convinces her that she was the one responsible for killing her parents. This leads to the final cutscene of the game, where Fran is suddenly in the asylum again. There she finds Dr. Oswald, the owner of the asylum, along with Aunt Grace, who takes Mr. Midnight in a cage and throws him off the edge of the world. Fran goes berserk and tries to strangle Aunt Grace, but then Dr. Oswald steps in with a gun and kills her. The game ends with Fran dying, but after she passes away, all her fantastical creature friends appear. They vanquish Dr. Oswald and Aunt Grace, and then they take her away, possibly to safety, or possibly into the afterlife. So, ladies and gentlemen, what the hell is actually going on in this game? Well, let's talk about it. Obviously, Fran Bow is a very, very vague, very, very cryptic indie game, and there are a lot of different people with a lot of different theories about what's going on in the story. Personally, I have my own theory. But before I get to it, let's talk about a few other theories first. The first theory I ever found on the game was, does Fran Bow have a mental illness by pushing up roses? In that video, pushing up roses provides a very good, very interesting argument about what might be going on in Fran's head, and how the game could be explained by Fran struggling with a severe mental disorder, such as schizophrenia.
This is traditionally defined as a chronic brain disorder which causes psychosis, strange behavior, delusions, paranoia, auditory and sometimes visual hallucinations, as well as fluctuations in personality.
So yeah, it's a good video, go watch it. Now, another popular theory about the game is the real theory. Maybe everything Fran sees is actually totally real, and the game is actually a fantasy game or a science fiction game. It's very possible that what's going on in the game is that Fran actually has supernatural powers in her brain, and she can see things that other people can't. One thing that supports this theory in particular is the car scene, where during a psychotic episode, Fran discovers Dr. Deern was abused by his father when he was a little boy. But then, when she mentions it out loud afterward, Deern wonders how she ever could have possibly known that. And really, how could she have known that? So, is everything in the game real? Is Remor real? And did he really force Fran to kill her parents? Well, I don't think so. I have another theory about the game, a much more depressing theory. Remember how I said the game scared me more the second time I played it? Well, here's why. I believe Fran Bow is a mentally tortured young girl who is being abused and experimented on during the events of World War II. No, really. You know that guy Dr. Oswald, the owner of the asylum who you see at the end of the game? Well, if you listen to what he says, and throughout the game you read all the little documents scattered everywhere, it's revealed that he used the asylum to experiment on twins. Throughout the game, if you pay attention, you'll find photos of twins stitched together, which is horrifying. And you know why it's horrifying? Because it actually happened in real life. Dr. Oswald bears striking resemblance to an actual scientist from Nazi Germany who experimented on twins during World War II, Joseph Mengele. This man was a terrifying person. Mengele performed countless deadly experiments on human subjects throughout his life, specifically with a team of other doctors in the concentration camp Auschwitz. One of the most horrifying and well-known of his experiments was a case in which he literally sewed two living people together, back to back, in an attempt to create conjoined twins. Now, the majority of Mengele's experiments on twins took place from the year 1943 to 1945. And guess when Fran Bow takes place? 1944. Coincidence? I don't think so. So what does this mean for Fran's story? Well, let's start with her parents. In the game, it's revealed through notes and select dialogue that Aunt Grace and Fran's mother were twins, and Dr. Oswald was studying them at a young age. So clearly, if Fran's mother was being experimented on at the asylum, Fran must be as well. At the end of the game, when Fran confronts Dr. Oswald, she asks him why Remor killed her parents, and when Oswald responds, he says, "Because your parents were interfering with my work." That is pretty strong evidence Oswald is the one responsible for having Fran's parents killed. So there you go. Oh, and what about Remor? Why does he show Fran killing her parents, and why does he follow her around like a villain throughout the whole game? Well, Remor is possibly a symbolic creature. His name, Remor, seems to be short for remorse, so it only makes sense that he might represent, say, her guilt, or her depression. After all, he's a black shadow, like the Kamalas, and the Kamalas seem to represent the depression in everyone else. Just about every human in the game has a Kamala, and I think Remor is Fran's Kamala, so that's my theory. There are a few other theories I've heard too, like that Fran is actually dead throughout the whole thing, or I even once heard a theory that Fran has a twin, and that you don't actually know which twin you're playing as throughout the game, but you're switching back and forth between the two. There are just tons of theories about it. But what about the adventure itself? What is actually happening throughout the gameplay? Well, I watched a video called Fran Bow Explain, a really wonderful in-depth video by Sparrow Games. And after watching that video, I think everything's pretty clear to me now. Here are the events of the game in order. The intro. Dr. Oswald has Fran's parents killed, possibly with the help of Aunt Grace, because she's an asshole. Fran sees her parents murdered and runs away from home with Mr. Midnight. Fran is then taken to the asylum, separated from Mr. Midnight, and Mr. Midnight ends up dead and never seen again. Chapter 1. Fran escapes the asylum. She also gets crazy red pills that make her hallucinate. Chapter 2. Fran walks through the woods, heavily drugged on pills and hallucinating more and more. She then walks into a well where she meets Clara and Mia at their house. What's actually going on here? Well, at one point later in the game, it's revealed that two twins were once sewn together by Dr. Oswald, and after both twins died following this experiment, their bodies were later thrown into a well. So most likely, Fran has stumbled around in the woods and actually fallen into the twins' well, where their dead bodies are rotting. She's probably seeing all this in her head, while in reality she's stuck at the bottom of the well with dead corpses, trying to climb out. Creepy, right? Anyway, chapter 3. Fran falls off a cliff and goes to Athirsta. This could likely be all a dream, or it could be a real magical journey.
In Athirsta, Fran believes herself to have become a tree, which is obviously the way a young girl's mind would relate to being paralyzed.
Good point. Chapter 4. Fran takes a ride on Itward's flying machine. Likely, Fran is just talking to her imaginary friend in her head and is hallucinating all of this while making her way home on foot. There's also a crashed, broken up bike at the beginning of the next segment, so she could have just been riding a bike this whole time. And maybe she crashed the bike while imagining her and Itward crashing in the machine. Also, like I said, Mr. Midnight isn't with her. He's dead. This is confirmed in the second half of Chapter 4 when Fran digs up her parents' dead bodies and finds Mr. Midnight's skeleton. Not to mention the part where he gets thrown into the void at the end. Chapter 5. Fran gets picked up and taken back to the asylum where she confronts the truth and meets her end at the hands of Dr. Oswald. What happens after this is really up to you. Are the magical creatures real? Are they taking Fran away to Athirsta? Is she dying? Is she dreaming? Or when the creatures blast Dr. Oswald away and Dr. Deern walks into the room, could that be symbolizing that Dr. Deern saved her? Is Fran maybe in an ambulance right now, waiting to live or die? I guess there's no way to be certain, but one thing we can be certain of is that Fran Bow is an awesome game. And you know, it's kind of an optimistic game. Despite its darkness, its sadness, and its complete twisted, morbid fucked upness, there's a lot of hope to this game. Before I end the video, I want to bring up one more thing. Remember in Athirsta when Fran learns about what the Kamalas are? Well, while she's there, she also learns about another type of creature. The Valakas. Valakas are creatures of pure light, who feed on virtue and goodness. Unlike the Kamalas, who feed on misery and come from the fifth reality, the Valakas come from the first reality, the realm of light. And it's said that if a Kamala chooses to, it can enter the first reality itself and become a Valaka. I just thought that was a really beautiful part of the game. It's hopeful, and it makes me feel like the entire game could be hopeful. After all, at the very, very, very end, when Fran is flying away into the sky, she does say one last thing before the credits roll. I still don't know many things, but one thing I do know, that between guilt and fear, I choose happiness.
I simply remember my favorite things, and then I still feel sad. Behold my top Patreon supporters. Behold my top Patreon supporters. Look at their little names. Their little